Hello, everybody. Okay, we are going to get into another episode of election stuff. So, we are now up to Reagan. I've gotten farther than I would have expected. I went from what's his name, Nixon to Ford to Carter, and now Reagan. Oh, sorry, just watching the TV spot for Civil War with Spider-Man. We're back to election stuff. Okay. So, in our last video, Carter was the incumbent president. Mondale was the incumbent vice president, but then Reagan and Bush just swooped right in, and they beat Carter. So Carter is out of the Oval Office. Reagan is now in. So and keep in mind, and so is George H.W. Bush. But please keep in mind, this was not the end of Mondale. No. Vice President Mondale would be back. You see, rumors roll around in 1984 about who the Democratic candidate would be. So, but the biggest rumor was that the quote-unquote favorite son was going to be Ted Kennedy, because Ted Kennedy ran in 1980, but Ted Kennedy declined to run. So then it was pretty obvious, and Jerry Brown ran that year again. So it was pretty obvious after that the favorite son, the quote-unquote favorite son, sorry, I got a text, was going to be Walter Mondale. And so Walter Mondale, the former vice president, got the nomination for president, and he beat Reagan. Reagan stood no chance. And oh no, not really. Yeah. Let me show you. You really think Mondale had a chance? Well, I'm going to show you something, kids. Let me show you something. Yeah, this is the result. These are the results. You got Mondale. Reagan wins. All this is all red. All Reagan except for Minnesota and Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is just, well, I don't know what that was up with them. They're just extremely Democrat. I think no matter what, I mean, they're still Democrat. They're always going to be Democrat. And as for Minnesota, well, Minnesota was the home state of Walter Mondale. So I think that's probably the reason why he won Minnesota. But if we look here, let me go back. If you look at the percentage, he did not win Minnesota by that much. The popular vote, you look at that, and percentage-wise, Walter Mondale won Minnesota 49.72%, as compared to Ronald Reagan, who got 49.54%. So yeah, he only won by like 0.20% really. He didn't, he really didn't sweep Minnesota that much. And the only reason why he did win, I think if it were anybody else, if it were Jerry Brown in this election, I mean, maybe if Jerry Brown were in the election, he would have only won D.C. and because Jerry Brown is also from California, but who do you think is going to win California more that election? Obviously Reagan. So yeah, But let's go back for a second. So let's talk about the election a little bit. Obviously, George H.W. Bush returned to be vice president. As for Mondale's running mate, interestingly enough, he went with Geraldine Ferraro, and Geraldine Ferraro was the first. She was the first female running mate, or the first female vice presidential nominee for a candidate, and she was also the only one up until 2008 when Sarah Palin ran with John McCain, but that's a story for another day. I guess the catchphrase you got to get used to. You know how like Blasphemous HD will always say in his videos, "I'm gonna edit that out." What was Scare Theater's catchphrase? I can't remember what his catchphrase was. Oh, I'll see you on the flip side. That was his catchphrase. Get used to the catchphrase of this series being that's a story for another day. So Geraldine Ferraro is the running mate for Mr. What's his name? For Walter Mondale, the former vice president and the Democratic nominee. She was a U.S. representative from New York. Now, Mondale actually did surprisingly well, but then Reagan made this comment in this other debate where they said, "Are you too old, Mr. Reagan?" And Reagan said, "No, I will not exploit my opponent's youth and inexperience." And that became one of the classic debate lines. That was considered one in debate history. Like if you look at like some of the best moments in debate history, or in presidential debate history, then you'll probably see that that quote saying that on that list of videos. But yeah, not really the biggest election. But yeah, not really the biggest election. And that once Reagan said that, he knew he was gonna lose. Now in what was it? 2004, and Walter Mondale is still alive, kids. So is Jimmy Carter. George H.W. Bush is too, but Ronald Reagan died in 2004, and his wife Nancy Reagan only recently died in the 90s. But yeah, this wasn't really the most surprising election, was it? But it was still a huge one. Yeah, so not really much to say because look at what just look at this map right over here. Everything except for DC right over around here-ish. And then also, obviously, right up here, we got Minnesota. So not really the most surprising election, but yeah. I'm also looking at the TV right now, and it's looking like Donald Trump has won. No, Connecticut. I know a lot of people like Donald Trump. I don't, but Yeah, so thanks for watching. Tune in next time. Okay, next one, Ronald Reagan is finishing up his second term as president, and uh, the Republicans have yet to pick a new nominee. Could Vice President George Bush take another shot at running for president? We'll have to find out on next episode, kiddies. Bye.